Hey everyone, this is Esther Levinter. Thank you for joining TorahExchange.com. I'm going to be doing a video series on our Rishonim because I think it's very important to give your classes on topics that you're passionate about and that you think about often. And this is definitely something that I've been thinking about a lot because I think it's very important to know our historical figures, who our leaders were, especially our Rishonim, which many people hold are indisputable today, unless you have a different Rishon to back yourself up. Many of us are familiar with Rambam, but there were so many other great thinkers among the Rishonim, including Ibn Ezra, Abarbanel, Rav Yosef Albo, Rambam, the Rif, the Rosh, etc. Dozens and dozens of them, and we don't really know much about them. So I think it's important to get to know who they were and what they wrote and what they thought philosophically, intellectually, and rabbinically, where they held, Rambam included, and to give us a little bit of a perspective of that time and where we stand today. So I'm going to start off with Abarbanel, which some of you may know, some of you may not, but he's definitely a pretty well-known figure among the Rishonim. His real name actually was Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yehuda Abarbanel, but we call him by his last name, just like we do with many of the Rishonim and commentators of the Torah. We usually give them, abbreviated names, makes it easier, or we just call them by their father's name or by their last names. So we're just going to call him Abarbanel like everybody else does. And the Abarbanel lives from 1427 to 1508. And he was born in Portugal, and he died, and he was buried in Italy. His works include Migdal Yeshuot. Within it, he writes a commentary on Sefer Daniel. He writes a commentary on Messianic prophecies, and he also writes an interpretation of literature written about the times of Mashiach. One of the reasons why he focuses so much on the times of Mashiach is because he lived at a point when the Jewish people were exiled from Spain, and when after the Jews were exiled from Spain, there was definitely a sense of hopelessness and distress, and he needed to uplift the people at the time. So he thought the best way to do this would be to talk about the coming of Mashiach and instill a sense of hope that there will be a final redemption, and this is not the end. For example, he also wrote things like Mayan HaYeshua and Yeshuat Mashiach and Mashmiya Yeshua, which also focused very heavily on Mashiach. We see this often with a lot of commentaries and a lot of rabbinical authorities that they focus on the times. A lot of things that they choose to talk about and address will have to do with what the nation is going through. Now, everything they're talking about is based on sources and is coming from something. They're not just making it up in order to make us feel good, but they recognize that there is a time and a place to say everything, and that's why the Abarbanel chose to focus on the coming of Mashiach in a lot of his works, because that's what Bnei Israel needed at the time. Now, Abarbanel was also held as a highly recognized figure in the realm of philosophy, which was actually pretty ironic because he was a pretty strong opponent of philosophy, because he actually believed more in looking at Judaism from a more historical perspective, in terms of divine and mass revelation and seeing the Torah through that point of view as opposed to a more philosophical point of view. And because of this, we do see him come into conflict a lot with Rambam, who is considered one of the greatest philosophical figures of his time, if not of all time. And we definitely see some contradiction in his work, Rosh Amanah, where Barbanel talks about Rambam's 13 principles of faith, and that at the time, a lot of different nations were writing principles of faith and principles to abide by, to establish themselves as a nation, and Barbanel viewed the Rambam's writing down of the 13 principles of faith as a very secular thing to do, because of that. Of course, many of us hold, it's definitely an overall accepted thing as far as I know, the 13 principles of faith, according to the Rambam. Define us as a Jew, and definitely is something that are very much needed, but that was the Abarbanel's perspective on it, and that's why you'll see some contradiction in that work. Obviously, he still had respect for Rambam, and he didn't, put him down as an authoritative figure. But everybody has different opinions, and it's coming from different angles, and that's kind of the point of Torah is, for dispute and to try to come to the ultimate truth, to come to the emet of a situation. And that's why we have Chavruta and Gemara. Everything's based and centered on debate. So that's just, one of the Rishonim that we're going to be talking about in this video series. I hope you stick around for more so that we could fully understand who our Rishonim were and where they come from. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you around soon.